Today in episode 46 of the podcast, we will be talking about the Harry Potter series may have found their Dumbledore already. The first cast member might be set for that series, and Star Wars, is it struggling for direction with their films? We'll also be reviewing the film Red 1 and reviewing Season 6 Part 2 of Cobra Kai. I'm Brad, he's Josh, and welcome to We'll Bring the Popcorn.
For our first news story of the week, Denzel Washington is out doing press for Gladiator 2, which we'll be talking about coming up next week. But in his rounds of the press, he's mentioned that he's coming up soon on retirement for acting. So he says, he's got an upcoming slate of films that he's going to be starring in, and he says after that it may be the end for him.
Yeah, we'll kind of kick it off with one of the more surprising ones that he talked about, because we kind of know in a speech that Chadwick Boseman did before that he said there would be no Black Panther without Denzel. While it looks like there's not going to be a Black Panther 3 without him, because Ryan Coogler is currently working on writing a role for Denzel in Black Panther 3.
That's amazing. He seems like a perfect fit for that film anyway. But yeah, I mean, the man's had an unbelievable career. He's made so many awesome movies. He's one of the best actors, honestly, of all time, in my opinion. Like, I can't think of any movie that he's been in that's, not good. Like, I love everything that he's ever done. He's got some things coming up. Like, he's going to be in a Hannibal movie about the military leader, not Hannibal Lecter. He's doing a Steve McQueen film. He's also doing an adaptation of Othello, which is kind of leaning more into that Shakespearean type stuff that, he's doing with Gladiator as well. It's that, older methodical, like type of stuff. But it seems like once he's through with this slate, he may be ready to hang it up, which is crazy because he's, had such an incredible run. But you see so many times these actors just keep doing roles until, they're unfortunately no longer with us. Very rarely do you hear a full on like retirement, I'm done, walking away kind of tactic from an actor. So kind of good on him for like, deciding like, hey, this is what I'm doing. I'm wrapping up. I want to enjoy the later years of my life and, just kind of want to enjoy retirement and actually retire, which is crazy.
Yeah, he's also got a King Lear project along with Othello, so he's got some more Shakespearean stuff that he's doing here. But yeah, anytime you see a film that's got Denzel in it, everyone's kind of like, all right, this is going to be good because he's got that quality from pretty much everything he's done. Not saying everything he's ever done has been a runaway hit, sure, but he's definitely been a guy who's had a ton more hits than he has misses. And yeah, you see a lot of guys who will go until they just can't go anymore. Even you got Ian McKellen who's still saying that he's going to act until he just cannot physically do it anymore. And, we just had Michael Caine retire again because of his health and his age and where he's getting. So yeah, it's kind of, It sucks to see him go, but also, hey, he's going to go before he's just over the hill and he can't do it too much. I mean, he's in his 60s now, sure, but, to be able to call it a day after that. But, I mean, he's still got a full slate, and it could potentially have Black Panther 3 being his final film if it's still being written. These other projects are kind of already in the works and going, so his final film could be a Marvel film.
That's a heck of a way to go out, too. But real quick, favorite Denzel movie? What's your favorite one?
I'm still going to go with Training Day. I mean, that was just an amazing performance by him.
Same. Absolutely. And kudos on an amazing career, and I'm excited to see the things he has in the works before he hangs up. But, man, what a legendary career for sure.
So we're going to move on over to the Harry Potter series. So, they're kind of getting ready to start filming next year. They put out the casting announcement for kids, but it actually seems like their first cast member we're going to get might be for Dumbledore. So Variety is reporting that Mark Rylance, he was in Wolfhard, Bridge of Spies, Dunkirk. He is the top choice for Dumbledore, and they've reached out to him to see if he'd be interested to do it. So it's not a done deal yet, but if he's interested, it looks like the job is his.
That's a great first cast member. I like Mark Rylance. I really enjoyed him in Wolfhard. That was a really good movie. I really enjoyed that. Dunkirk, obviously, is an incredible film as well. Won all kinds of awards and stuff like that. But yeah, that's a good first get for that series that, that Max and Warner Brothers are going to be pumping a ton of money into. It's basically like going to be their equivalent of Lord of the Rings, Rings of Power, with how much time and money they're going to be invested in this, because it sounds like it's going to be a several season project for them. You put Harry Potter on anything, it's going to do really well, right? Even the Fantastic Beasts movies, which weren't the best necessarily, still did a ton of business because of the adjacentness of Harry Potter. But the fact that this is a full-on Harry Potter reboot, you got a whole new generation of people that you can introduce to these characters and these stories, and just create a whole new generation's worth of material that, in my opinion, is going to do very well for them if I were to guess ahead of time. But getting an actor like that in the fold already bodes really well, I think, for the series.
Yeah, there'll be a little apprehension behind a lot of people who are either you're a fan of the books, you're a fan of the movies, you're a fan of both. There's a big mix of everything there. Sure. You're going to go in, all right, how are they going to make this different, but how are they going to live up to the performances stuff we got, especially we had 2 Dumbledores with Snape and with McGonagall and Professor McGonagall and everything. Like, how are they going to fill those roles? And, Dumbledore, he could do a good job. You want someone older but not too old, sure. So that, because you're thinking, there's 7 books, so you think that's at least a 7-season commitment, if not more than that, because we don't really know if they're going to do a book a season, if they're going to make everything kind of split up, if they're going to, separate it by book, or if they're just going to keep going, and maybe you get 10 to 14 seasons out of something that could potentially be 7. But you also got to realize with the kids that they're going to be growing up, so they can't go too far unless they're, at 30 still able to look like a teenager, like a lot of actors have been doing. Even Tom Holland still looks like a teenager at his age and everything. He's in his 20s, but, still. But it's interesting that Dumbledore might be the first one that they cast. We figure the kids are going to be unknowns again because, they're not want to probably put a big face behind that, but all the teachers and the staff of Hogwarts and everybody else are going to be probably bigger names, or at least somewhat known names, to help carry that a little bit.
Yeah, that's gonna be a lot of fun. I'm so looking forward to that show when it does, eventually see the light of day. I think they were making it sound like it was gonna be 2026 by the time we got the show.
Probably.
Yeah, which is huge. The casting is already underway. We don't know how far they've gotten along with that, with everybody and who they're wanting to, put in that. But that's a heck of a first one to hopefully announce. I hope he takes it. He's a fantastic actor, and that'd be a great first addition to the show for sure.
Yeah, and like I said, it's probably going to film early 2025. But you just don't know with these shows like Lord of the Rings, Game of Thrones, a few others. They're taking a couple years in between filming and getting out there because of special effects and everything. In Harry Potter, set design, special effects is going to be pretty huge. So if it comes out in 2026, it's probably going to be late, or it might be early 2027.
Yeah, looking forward to that one when it comes out for sure. I want to move on to a show that I can't stop raving and talking about since it's finally aired its finale, and that's The Penguin. Now, there's been some ambiguity about whether or not, Colin Farrell is going to reprise the role of, the Penguin Oswald, and it seems like it may not be the end of that character, and it looks like he could come back. I know he's been open to the possibility of it coming back. He says he signed on to play the Penguin, but we don't know how it's going to be really attached to the other Batman films, if he's going to have a bigger role or a smaller role in it. We just don't know yet, but it seems like we may not have seen the last of Colin Farrell in that role.
Yeah, because right after, or kind of right before the season ended, he talked about that, he's probably done putting on the latex and being that, but then after the finale aired, he's like, I did sign on to do 3 movies with Matt Reeves, and even talked to him and Matt both talked about, well, they're throwing around ideas for a season 2, but Colin will only do it if it feels right, if they got the right story, if it makes sense for him to come back. It seems maybe in the Batman Part 2 he might have 5 or 6 scenes, something like that. They tossed that around, so he might have a smaller role, but yeah, we absolutely love the series. We haven't done a review yet. We're trying to find a spot to get that in here with the schedule, especially at the end of the year being so stacked with films and stuff. But if you haven't watched A Penguin yet, go check it out. Colin Farrell, just like in the Batman, he just disappears as the Penguin. He was absolutely fantastic, but the entire cast around him, like that series was amazing. So I am looking forward to them doing more, but I do like the fact that they're looking at is we have to get the right story. We just don't want to bring them back just to bring them back. Like, make sure it has a solid story behind it.
Yeah, like we mentioned, we haven't done the review, and I know we're going to eventually fit that in somewhere. So keep your eyes out and look out for that. Advanced spoiler, we both absolutely love the show. We're going to rave about it. It's going to score very highly. And I will say that if this is what DC could give us, this is what would get DC back for fans, in my opinion. This type of storytelling, this type of, character work, acting ability. Like, Colin Farrell was amazing, but Kristen Milioti as Sophia Falcone, steals the entire series for me. She's incredible and amazing, and I can't say enough positive things about that show, but we'll get to that when we come around to it. But it's going to rank very highly on my favorite things I've watched this year for sure.
It also throws in on probably another monkey wrench to James Gunn's new DCU because this exists outside of it. So this is Matt Reeves' world. It doesn't exist within what James Gunn's doing, and it's one of the best series of the year, and they did fantastic with it. So it's like, all right, is our own Batman universe with Matt Reeves going to trump whatever James Gunn does with it? Like, there's a lot to live up to from this. Like, this is how you do a villain show. This is how you do a spinoff of a superhero show. Like, it was fantastic. But yeah, we could go into a full review right now because I'm ready to talk about it. It was that good. But yeah, we'll get that in there here soon. But yeah, it was an amazing show, and I am looking forward if they do another one. But yeah, I'm right on board. Just as we were Shogun, that we've questioned about them coming back for now 2 more seasons. Like, you just want it done right because you enjoyed the show so much. So I hope if they do it, they find that right story, and it's not something that they just force in there just to do something.
Agreed. And I think they've got the way they leave it off potentially to set up for more storytelling. I know it's going to kind of work its way back into Batman and see where it goes with the next Batman film. If they can pivot away from that back into another Penguins season, if it makes sense, I'm all for it. Because like, you even hear talk of, you know, the guy who played Victor, like, worked the most with Colin Farrell in that makeup, and he was like, it took a while for me to realize that that's actually Colin Farrell. He's like, you see little glimmers of it in his eyes when you talk to him a little bit. He's like, you could tell when it's Colin and when he's not lost into the, you know, the character so much. But it's fun to hear people that are like working directly with him see just how deep he dove into that role, because physically looking at him, you can't tell it's Colin Farrell, because it's amazing the work that it made for him to look that way, but also the way he moves, the way he talks, the way he acts. Like, he just does such a phenomenal job. And I hope he gets a little more love come awards season time, maybe around the next Emmys he's nominated, because he gives a fantastic performance.
I was going to say, if he doesn't get nominated for something after this performance, there's something wrong, because this really wasn't, again, we're going into a review without having the episode out and just as a news story, but it's because it was so good. Colin was just fantastic. Like, he disappeared in the role. He deserves to get it, because it's less of a superhero movie and more of a crime mobster movie, and it was just fantastic in that way. Like, it was, even if you're not a superhero fan or super villain fan or something, this is a show you can sink your teeth into if you like the gangster mob kind of movie because it's more of that than anything else. And yeah, Colin, just, you can see it in his eyes, as you said a little bit, but his accent, his commitment to the walk, his commitment to everything, he just completely disappeared into the role.
So good. We'll definitely go touch on that series overall at some point and give an overall review of it. But just to know, when we do talk about it, we are going to rave about it. So I'm looking forward to that.
So, of course, we have Stranger Things, the final season we're going to get next year. And, you know, Millie Bobby Brown has been the biggest kind of star outside of that, doing more things. But Finn Wolfhard is right up there with her, and he's got another project on his hands. So he's teaming with Billy Burke again. So they had their movie Hell of a Summer picked up by Neon last year. They wrote and co-directed that. There was a lot of good buzz about it. I haven't been able to check it out or see it. But they are writing a script and will be teaming up with Jason Reitman, who's going to produce it, that he, of course, Finn teamed up with for the new Ghostbusters movies. They're doing a remake of the 1999 horror comedy film Idle Hands for Sony.
I love that. Idle Hands is one of those... It's one of those movies that it's really good, but you don't ever hear it being at the top of anybody's list of favorite like horror films or comedy films. But I really enjoyed the original Idle Hands, and I'm excited to see what they do with it, because I think you could kind of modernize that up a little bit and make it fit like now versus when it came out. Because even at the time that it came out, you know, Devon Sawa was, you know, kind of one of the it actors in Hollywood that you got to play in as one of the leads in that film. But Finn Wolfhard is, like you said, he's very quietly carved out a very nice career for himself. And I like seeing when they can not only do, you know, great work in front of the camera, but writing and producing and directing. You love when you can see him kind of stretch their creative legs and do things like that. And it's exciting to see what, he comes up with. I'm curious to see how this film comes out for sure when it's done, but getting Jason Reitman behind it is a good pickup as well to kind of help collaborate and bring this movie to life, because I really enjoy a lot of the work that Jason Reitman does as well. So having them collaborate on a film like this that we already know and can kind of take that source material and kind of twist it into a remake that fits for now. There's a lot of fun creative things that I think they could do with it, and I'm excited to see where they take it.
And it's kind of crazy to see Finn doing all this at such a young age. Yeah. Like you said, writing, directing, producing, doing all this stuff at so young. Like, good for him to just hit the ground running and keep everything going. And there is potential, since they did direct that film last year, that he and Billy could also be directing Idle Hands. So the director hasn't been announced, but they're kind of eyeing them to be able to do the directing as well. But yeah, Idle Hands is one that I somewhat remember, but then you don't remember, but you remember. But I did love that Devon Sawa came out when this was announced, and he's like said he was talking to his kids, and his kids were excited. You see that they're doing this? Like, I was in that, right? And he's like, no, you weren't, Dad, or something like that. They just made fun of him, like, yeah, okay, yeah. Because, I mean, he was a big star around that time, but that was kind of also the time where his star power was kind of going down a little bit, and he was kind of fading out of everything. But I am interested to see if they do it and see if he gets a cameo as a different character, being a dad or something else, because, of course, what they normally do, if they have a cameo, he's going to maybe playing the dad of the kid and everything. But it's interesting to see what they do with this. So, of course, we have a ton of remakes and reboots and everything else happening. Yeah. But if they could do something interesting, make some changes and see how they do with it, because horror comedy can work really well. Like, look at Shaun of the Dead and look at many others. Even I would almost call Terrifier a horror comedy, because it's so crazy and over the top, but it is all crazy horror film, but it's also silly and over the top. I don't think they're going to go that direction. That's going to be a little too much over the top. But you have seen kind of a big shift and change in the tone with a lot of horror films lately. So it might be the right time to do a remake of something like Idle Hands.
Yeah, I think so. And it's exciting to see what they do with it. I'm going to be looking forward to that when it comes out for sure. So I think it's a good time to jump in and talk about some Star Wars news. So it seems like it's being a little bit of a creative cluttered mess, which no one should be surprised given the way the last trilogy worked. But it seems like there's some infighting between Lucasfilm and the people that are working on the next series of films that they're trying to make, and kind of the direction they want to go in. So Star Wars is notorious for creating like a nostalgic feeling. Like, these films were very popular 40 years ago, and that is carried on for generations now. But I think they're really struggling in which direction to take it moving forward, because we've heard talks of them wanting to make like a film centered around Rey, who was the central character for the most recent trilogy. But there's some debate on whether or not they want to expand more into the Skywalker universe and saga that's kind of already been, some people would say it's been overdone to this point, or if they want to go in a completely new direction. But it sounds like with the infighting, they're kind of unclear on what direction they want to go.
Yeah, it's really interesting just how much came out by saying, Lucasfilm kind of admitting that it's a nostalgia-based enterprise that they're doing, but they're running out of ideas to keep the nostalgia going, which, we kind of talked in the last episode, stuff we would see that could tie a little bit, but bring it into a new direction, doing the more samurai type of Star Wars. And that way you can change how everything looks and sets, and you can still have it Star Wars, but do something different by going in the future. But yeah, it seems like there's a lot of infighting within Lucasfilm because they don't know which direction to go, because they're kind of, as you mentioned, they're jumping back on board of Rey, but apparently they want to use Rey a lot. They see Rey as a way forward, even after how the last three in the trilogy were taken. They want to go with Rey, but then there's another problem on top of that. They have a lot of films in development, and they potentially could be using Rey, could not be using Rey. They could be using similar characters or in the same timeline, but they haven't fully talked to the directors about it. So some directors could be developing a film that uses these characters and something else, but another film that possibly comes out before it could be doing the same thing, and they have no idea about what's being done.
It just sounds like you need to just lock everybody in a room and hash it out. It's kind of what it needs to do. It seems like the left hand doesn't know what the right hand is working on, which doesn't bode well when you're trying to come up with things creatively, right? You have a mixing of ideas on one side and a mixing of different ideas on the other side, and it's supposed to come together to make a cohesive story. You don't know what's going to happen, and that's not a good direction that Star Wars needs to be going in if they want to, get back a lot of the fan base that they really kind of lost on, with this most recent trilogy, that we're kind of like, okay, we're kind of done with Star Wars at this point. But you gotta wonder if, like, are you including Jon Favreau and Dave Filoni in these things, who have garnered a whole lot of, positive will and support from, Star Wars fans for how well Mandalorian has gone and everything that they've done on the TV side, and maybe help translate it into the film world? Like, I think Mandalorian and Grogu is going to be a huge hit when it comes out in theaters, just because of the success of the TV show. But what direction you go with film-wise after that, there's so much lore in that universe that you can explore if you really wanted to. And they seem to be doing more of it on the TV side than the film side, which I'd like to see him eventually flip, because there's so many different directions you can go with it. Like you said, we've talked about the samurai story. You could do a Knights of the Old Republic trilogy if you wanted to, and kind of go back to, that source material. There's a whole bunch of, I know they don't like to always use it, but there's been some incorporation of fan fiction as well that they've, incorporated into these movies. And I don't understand why they don't, take some of those things and kind of generate some new stuff out of it. But I don't know, man. It's the fact that they don't seem to have their act together is a little troublesome for the future of something that, a lot of people really enjoy.
Yeah, because they said kind of the TV side hasn't exactly had the same problems. They've given them more freedom, but as you mentioned, they're now trying to take the TV side into film. You've got the Mandalorian Grogu coming. You have, another film in that where Mandalorian Grogu and Ahsoka is all going to be wrapped up in a film. So I don't know if that bodes well for them or not, because it feels like maybe they're trying to force the TV side into the movies instead of figuring out something new to do. Because, yeah, as you mentioned, there's been rumors about Knights of the Republic, but they haven't done anything on it. If they do that well, it could be fantastic. You got 2 games you could base off of, but you can also change that. But we've also seen some development issues with a remake of the Knights of the Old Republic game, that they've struggled to get that going. Like, it's been canceled and brought back and struggling and everything else. But you also got Respawn's Jedi series. It's moving into its 3rd and final game, that you could potentially bring that into a new series. You go back to Starkiller and bring Star Wars The Force Unleashed into a TV series or a film series that a lot of fans could touch on. That's in the Skywalker saga as well, that you can have it lean in and touch. I could bring Hayden Christensen back as Darth Vader to play with that era and stuff too. So there are some ideas they could borrow from stuff they've already done, but it feels like, yeah, there is a real loss with direction, and we'll see if Dave and John are brought more into that, or if they stay on the TV side, or exactly what's going to happen. But it does sound like there's kind of been a big mess, and they've been struggling with film for a little bit. Like, I enjoyed the sequel trilogy. There was a lot of problems, and Solo was okay. It had some problems. Rogue One was fantastic. Andor has been a great follow-up, and we have season 2, the final season, come next year. So they've had some decent stuff come out of it, but there's been a lot of misses. So I hope they can figure out who's going to lead up and move this forward and get this mess figured out, because the films are where they make most of their money and where they get most of the popularity. So they really need to find that right direction to go forward.
It just kind of sounds like they need to put a person in charge with a singular vision and kind of get that vision done, whomever that is determined to be. Because one of the big things that I think hurt this last trilogy was the fact that they changed directions midway through it, to where you had, in my opinion, the 7th film was fantastic. Like, it's one of the highest grossing films of all time. It brought a lot of people, quote unquote, back to Star Wars. Like, they absolutely loved it. And then the next one, just kind of changed direction, changed directors. They took the story and just did like a hard right turn on it, and it turned a lot of people off. And then by the time they tried to course correct with the 9th film, it felt like, okay, let's just throw something against the wall and see if it sticks, just to kind of end this out and try to steer that ship back in the opposite direction again. But it's that disjointedness that I think really turns a lot of people off, and that's where, like, a singular vision can come into play. If you need to just branch these groups of people off and, like, here's your project, you are going to work on this, well, you also work on this other project, and we can kind of figure out timelines and make it work. Like, that seems to be a smarter direction of, how that should, in my opinion, be going. This is just my opinion. I'm spitballing here, but it sounds like if you can't put one person in charge and make sure that, everything is working together smoothly, branch them off, kind of, I hate to say silo it because it feels like you're stifling them creatively, but like you're going to work on this, you're going to work on this, and just stay away from each other. And it could be two separate entities, but I think that needs to be communicated somehow.
If only Disney, who owns Lucasfilm, had another studio that has dealt with an issue of having a bunch of interconnected films work together. Ask Kevin Feige.
I was like, do you give know a little Kevin Feige in the Star Wars
give a little
universe?
help on how he's handled all that. I mean, of course, the last phase has been very mixed by a lot of people, but we're hopefully getting back with Secret Wars. We had Deadpool and Wolverine, everything moving forward in a decent way here, but they handled that pretty well for a couple phases, so maybe they need to have a little discussion, or maybe it's kind of that problem with Disney owning them all, that they just want to churn out a lot of stuff and they don't know who's going to handle what, because you cannot have too many cooks in the kitchen going in so many different directions and ways and try to have those come together to tell a solid story while no one knows what the other people are doing. That was a problem with the last three. You had too many people doing too many different things and they didn't know what each other were doing. They have to know. If you're doing interconnected stories, they have to know what the others are doing. Yeah. They have to tie that together. So hopefully they're able to come back, get somebody in charge, whether it's John or Dave or somebody else, and get that figured out before we get a massive, well, they're using Rey in this movie, and then they're using Rey in this movie, but they don't have no idea what happened between the two, so something they do in here makes no sense to the other one. Like, disjointedness is going to cause a big problems if they can't get it figured out.
Agreed, and that's something that they need to get together, and then they need to hash it out, and they need to fix it quickly if they're going to get something out within reason. Now, there was a placeholder in for the end of 2026 for the next Rey movie. That has been officially scrapped. It's been replaced with yet another Ice Age movie, Ice Age 6. Like I was just talking to you before we started recording, I completely forgot that they had made 5 of these already, which is insane. But apparently, guess what? There's another Ice Age movie coming out, and it's taking the spot of that in 2026. So if you're into those films, salute you, but I didn't even know they made 5. Like, they're going to make a 6th one now, and it's getting that spot, which is crazy.
Yeah, I've watched them all with my kids, but they're probably the most forgettable out of all the animated series between Pixar's and Disney's and DreamWorks and what everyone else is doing. They've kind of been a little more forgettable with the stories and everything else. They haven't been terrible movies, but they haven't been great movies. And especially the last few have been feeling like phone in. So we kind of thought this series was dead with the sale of Fox to Disney and everything, but they're going back to the well again. But yeah, with all this infighting and everything going on with Star Wars, for them to pull a Star Wars film out of 2026 definitely shows that they're struggling to find the right direction. And then, as we mentioned last episode, Simon Kinberg has a trilogy that he's writing and directing and developing. Like, is that trilogy going to be the one that tries to bring everything together and move it forward? But it also looks like it might be one that's causing some issues with how they're planning to do everything, because we heard about the Rey kind of Jedi training film a couple years ago now, and now probably 2027 at the earliest before we see that. So hopefully they can get their act together and figure out exactly what they want to do with the films going forward, because it's a franchise that it needed a little break, but you don't want to see it die. And there's so much they could do, but it feels like they are concentrating too much on the nostalgia. They can move forward with other nostalgia that, like we said, in the video games that they haven't gone to yet, or do something new by taking it farther in the future in some different planets and expose a brand new world of Star Wars stuff that they could go forward and people will go see it. If you have lightsabers, if you have the Sith and the Jedi, you have light and dark, people are going to go see it.
Yeah, I mean, it feels like a very simple formula for success if they want to do it, but as we all know, it's not. If it were that easy, we could all do it. But the hero trope in a story is, a classic way of storytelling, right? So at the end of the day, they just need to get it together, because you hate to see this type of disjointedness in something that so many people love, and it'd be great to see everybody just kind of come together, reach a common ground, and move forward and give us some new and exciting stories that we're gonna just consume like crazy when they come out. But Lucasfilm, get your stuff together, man. Like, it's time. Like, it's been enough of a mess for too long. Let's get it right before you kind of you kind of lose all the goodwill that you have left. You know what I mean? If that's kind of a harsh way of putting it, but if you mess around with it too much, there may not be an audience left for it, which is unfortunate.
Yeah, moving on to kind of another mess. DC has been a bit of a mess with their films, with everything with Zack Snyder, and now with James Gunn taking over, and he has his stuff going. So Max announced some new premiere dates for some seasons. So I'll start off with The Last of Us. So, this was highly praised, but also kind of talked about, well, it followed the story, but it left a lot of stuff out. And we got The Last of Us Season 2 is going to debut in spring 2025. So if you've played the games, you kind of know what happens there with as many characters. And that game was kind of controversial as well with some stuff it does. So it's going to be really interesting to see how Season 2 really works them, because they are talking about potential Season 3 and 4 for that show to go forward.
Yeah, I mean, The Last of Us, the first season of the show was fantastic. Pedro Pascal is awesome in pretty much everything that he does, and I think that they did a good job of adapting elements of the video game into the TV series, because it's hard to make a whole season out of these video games that you play, but I think they did a really good job of taking kind of the central story from the game and adapting it into a show. Now, the concern is going to be, if you're doing 3 and 4 seasons of it, do you stretch it out even more amongst like what the game has done, or are you just kind of taking it and tangentially doing your own thing with it while incorporating some of the similar elements from the story of the games, which I think is what they're doing. And I'm very excited for Season 2. Season 1 was awesome. I'm really excited for that to come out in the spring. Feels like I've been waiting forever for this show to come back. But it's because I watched it so intently when it first aired that I'm just chomping at the bit to get this new season out and see where they go with it. But that's definitely one to check out that I'm excited to talk about for sure.
Yeah, and so to bring the confusion back into DC here, we have the next season of Peacemaker is going to be out in August 2025, which is 1 month after Superman, James Gunn's Superman. So we have the huge big start. We got Creature Commandos, which is kind of going to kick it off, but we got Blue Beetle was supposed to be tied into it. But, Peacemaker was a part of the old, and it was kind of on the outskirts, but we had Jason Momoa and we had some kind of cameos that tied it to the Snyderverse, but it's going to be part of James Gunn's new verse, and it's like, all right, how are they going to make that work? Like, I really enjoyed the Peacemaker show, but it just adds in more confusion as we talked with Star Wars and stuff. How are they going to make this show be tied to kind of both universes now, because they've had those crossovers, and I'm looking forward to see what happens, but it just, it adds more confusion. Like, he was part of the old DCU, but he's part of the new DCU too.
Yeah, and they kind of make it sound like you'll know how that plays in with the Superman film, and I'm very excited for that. Obviously, some of that was filmed here locally, and I'm excited to see where they go with that, just to kind of give James Gunn a little bit of the benefit of the doubt with how well he's done with all of his Marvel stuff coming over into DC and kind of taking over, just to see that creative direction that they go with. But Peacemaker, very excited about that too. I loved Season 1. I think Peacemaker's got one of, if not the best TV openings ever. Like, the sound, the music that's attached to it, the tone of the show is hilarious. It's over the top, it's graphic, it's vulgar, it's violent, and it's just a ton of fun. And I'm excited to see how that plays into the DC universe, and just to kind of see this whole thing kick off and really see if he can right the ship with at least that area of DC that's been lacking for a while now. Now, we know that the animated series that they make have always been really good, and a lot of the recent TV stuff has been solid. Now, can they move that into film and the creative direction moving forward? Let's see what they do here for sure.
And we're apparently getting a brand new intro for Peacemaker as well. They say is going to top the original, which is a big ask, because that was a hysterical, great intro and stuff. So yeah, we'll see exactly how it does, but it just adds so much more confusion about where's the direction going, because we have Rick Flag, who's going to be played by Joel Kinnaman. I forget his name, sorry for butchering it. He was in Suicide Squad that James Gunn did. He's going to be back, but as a different character, right? So he's playing a different character in that. So there is a lot of confusion with DC, but we'll see if James Gunn is able to find a way to tie all these previous actors and previous characters that he's keeping around into the new DCU.
Yeah, and we just got to give it time now to see where these things come out and what they look like, and we'll judge them harshly if we need to, and we'll celebrate them if it warrants it. So I'm excited to see that content when it comes out. One of my favorite TV shows of all time, now moving into our final story before we get into our reviews, is Friday Night Lights. It's one of my favorite TV shows of all time. Absolutely brilliant show. It was only on for 5 seasons, but it's kind of held up over the course of time. And now it appears that it's getting a reboot. So everything's getting a remake and a reboot, right? But we're getting kind of a soft reboot of Friday Night Lights. It's going to be set kind of in the same universe, but with new characters for it.
Yeah, it's going to be interesting to see how this can turn out because, yeah, everything's being remade, rebooted and everything. Like, the film was fantastic. They were able to do a fantastic show after the film, doing that as well. But can lightning strike 3 times? Can they make 3 good Friday Night Light properties? And we'll see, because, I mean, it launched a career of several and probably didn't get as big as we thought they were going to be after that series because it was such a popular show. Everybody was so good in it. But I'll check it out. I'll see how they do. But there's always in the back of my mind, like, all right, another remake, another reboot. Do we really need it? Like, the movie did it so great as a movie. The show did it so great as a show. Do we need to revisit it again? Like, do we need to go back to that well? Because it's going to be hard to try to do it a third time as well as the first 2 times were done.
Yeah, it really did help launch the careers of a lot of people. Obviously, the coach in Friday Night Lights is about to be, the new Hal Jordan in the Green Lantern series, and he's done several other. He was in the most recent Godzilla movies as well. Like, he's a fantastic actor as well. Minka Kelly got her start in that show as well. Like, she's become a very well-known, high-profile actress. You've got, obviously, Michael B. Jordan, who starred in, like, the 4th and 5th seasons of the show, is one of the biggest actors on the planet now, like one of the biggest stars in the world. So there's a lot of good things that have come out of that show. I'm excited to see where they go with it. And that type of story kind of lends itself to some really good drama and some really good writing. Like, how obsessed people are with high school football in the state of Texas. It's an easy story to tell. Like, it's not like the story kind of writes itself, but the way they took such care of all of those characters, and there were layers to each of them, and each of them had different backgrounds and motivations and such depth to their characters that they were able to explore, is what I think made that series work so well. And it's a football show that's not always necessarily about football. It just happens to be connected to it, but it was such a brilliant show. I love this show more than I did the movie. The movie was good, but the show was brilliant, and I'm curious and excited to see where they take it moving forward. But just so much nostalgia. I want to go back and rewatch that show now.
I think more than anything got me wanting to go back and rewatch it instead of like looking forward to the new one. But it's because we enjoyed it so much. It's like you take something that was done really good. Does it warrant going back to the because you there's plenty that you could go back to and keep it different, but it was just done so well. Why are you trying to top something that was done so well twice? Yeah, I am probably a fan more of the series than the movie, but the movie was great. You had Tim McGraw and everything in that. And, of course, the series also had Taylor Kitsch that became big for a little bit. Like, even though a lot of people didn't like it, I enjoyed the John Carter movie that he did. I thought it was fantastic. I'm still mixed on his Gambit that showed up, and probably the worst X-Men movie that we've gotten and stuff. And, of course, Connie Britton was in it. So there was a lot of big names and big stars that came out of it and stuff, but it's just I'm holding reservations until I see it, because sometimes when they go back to do these remakes and reboots, they just don't work out that well. And again, it would be doing it a third time and trying to make it as good as the rest of it. But we'll see if they can nail that and get it right, because it was such a great series that they did. Like, the drama was on point, everything just, the acting, everything just made sense, and they did it right and kind of left off before it got kind of out of control, or where it loses some of its thunder. It left right at this right point that it needed to.
Absolutely. It's such a good show, and we'll see if they can take good care with it and do it right, for sure.
Yeah, moving on to our film review of the week, we went and saw Dwayne Johnson, Chris Evans, J.K. Simmons, and Red One. So this is kind of the first big holiday film of the year. We have Dwayne Johnson playing Santa's number one, the commander, his elf, but it's not elf, it's ELF. They're not elves. And he plays the second command. So the whole story is that, it's a day or two before Christmas and they're getting prepped and ready. But Dwayne Johnson, he's kind of struggling to find his want and desire for Christmas anymore. He's been doing it for so long. He just sees how bad people are getting, and it makes him reconsider wanting to keep doing this. And, well, Santa gets kidnapped and he has to go back into action to try to find who kidnapped him, but also kind of bring in one of the worst people that they've had on the naughty list to try to help find Santa.
Yeah, this movie, in all honesty, was a lot of fun. It's better than it has any business being, in my opinion, because the premise is just absurd, right? Santa gets kidnapped right before Christmas, and the Rock's got to find him. But I think they told a really they did a fine job telling the story. Like, it's not completely overacted. There's a bunch of silly hijinks that you kind of want in a holiday film. Holiday movies are allowed to be, kind of over the top and cheesy and goofy, and this hits a lot of those notes for me that I really like in a holiday film. Like, I honestly feel like this movie's going into my holiday rotation. Like, this is going to be one of those movies that I watch annually, that I put into my rotation, just because it's so much fun. It's so silly. It's absurd. You get, Chris Evans playing, Jack, who is this, for lack of a better term, he's a total dirtbag, right? He's, completely self-centered, doesn't believe in Santa Claus, doesn't believe in the spirit of the holidays.
Steals candy from a baby.
Yeah, there's some really absurd stuff that he does to kind of, he's this technically gifted person who can find anyone. That's find anyone and anything you need him to. That's like his skill set. And he's kind of a mercenary. He's a guy who does a lot of shady things, but he gets paid a lot of money to do it, but he has gambling problems. Like, he's a hot mess. Like, that's the easiest way I can describe him. But they kind of recruit him to help find Santa. They come, there's a lot of hilarity that ensues with that, but it's done in such a fun way that it's not you don't have to take it so seriously. Like, it's not intended to be a serious film. Like, they fight snowmen at one point, and you're dealing with this comic, Santa Claus. And then I know you're laughing because in the fight with the snowmen, it's a very, very, very silly way to stop the snowmen.
Yeah, how they defeat the snowmen. It
seemed like this is so formidable and so scary and so intimidating for them to be stopped by the most absurd mean possible, which we won't spoil. Go see the movie. But it's so funny. But they do the humor well. They do the dialogue well. Like, it's got your funny, cheesy one-liners. It's got so many things that you want in a really good holiday movie.
Yeah, I was a little bit more mixed on it. Like, I had fun with it, but I also looked at it from a dad angle. But also, I didn't go in expecting Shakespeare or something else. Yeah. I knew it was going to be over the top, but I think it really had a problem with tone, that it didn't really know kind of what it was wanting to do and kind of what group that this movie was really for. Because starting with the tone, everybody kind of plays a role very seriously. Like, they're taking almost like a drama type of seriousness into it. Like, they're cracking jokes and doing silly over the top stuff, but they're very serious about what's happening and what's going on. Like, Dwayne Johnson is very straight-laced. Lucy Liu is very straight and serious. And that kind of affected me a little bit because it's like they're playing it so dead serious, but then it's so ridiculously over the top. But it also threw in some concerns with me with being a dad. Like, I'm not a prude with language and everything. We try to keep the podcast free of language so anybody can enjoy it. Sure. And all that. But it's like there was a lot of cursing and a lot of words that were used. Like, well, the over the top and silliness makes me think it's made for kids, but the language kind of puts it more into the teens and the adults. But then I also think it's probably too over the top for teens. So exactly who is the demographic and who are they looking for this movie to be, just because it's kind of serious acting, but over the top. The language will take it out of rotation for probably a lot of families just because of the words they use. Again, not being a prude about language, but there's a lot of people, especially when it comes to holiday stuff, you want something you can put on that you don't have to worry about what your kids are going to repeat after the movies or saying stuff. So that tone and how it kind of did things and who exactly was looking for was kind of a problem for me. I just didn't... I think it could have been a really good family film if they left a few things out in that way, but it just felt to me like, who did they make this film for?
I think it's not necessarily a kid's holiday movie, though. It's not really intended to be one, because the tone of, if you just take The Rock, who was pretty much the main character in the movie, right? So you have Santa, obviously Santa, but your two main characters are Chris Evans's character and The Rock's character, right? So these are the two main guys in the movie. It's kind of a buddy team up. They're buddies, they're not buddies kind of thing. But the movie's rated PG-13, so you know what you're getting before. Like, this isn't a PG movie masquerading as an adulted up. Like, The Rock's like a little bit of a light spoiler. The Rock's motivation is he doesn't see the spirit of Christmas in adults anymore because adults are so jaded with the world and are so self-centered and things of all that nature, and he's kind of losing that. And then, like, Santa's role is to remind him, like, the reason why he's Santa Claus is because he sees that inner child in everyone and the possibility for it's to be there. But The Rock's whole thing is, like, he's about to resign as, you know, the head of the ELF because he just doesn't see that spirit of the holidays in adults. Like, he loves the kids part of it, but he's so, like, turned off by the way adults act, and they kind of play into that in, like, the early parts of the movies where they go to the mall and they see, you know, the kids, but he also sees how the adults are acting, and the adults are very, like, you know, like, selfish, self-centered, and just kind of nasty to each other, and, you know, all that stuff. And, like, he's kind of, the whole premise of this is, like, to save Santa, but at the same time he's trying to find his holiday spirit to, you know, maybe change his mind. And that's not really a kid thing. That's more of a, like, focus towards, like, teens and adults who are a little more jaded and a little more, like, cynical and see, you know, the world for what it really is or whatever. But I think that's kind of the whole point of the movie. And, like, I don't necessarily think, like, you can have holiday movies that aren't geared specifically towards kids and families. Like, I think it's a good one to add to mine because it is fun, it is over the top, it's silly. I like those kinds of things in my holiday movies. Like, I love the kids' classic films as well. Like, I'll always watch Rudolph and Frosty and the Grinch and all that stuff that's, like, really geared towards kids. But this one is aged up a little bit, and I think it kind of leans into that because it's not necessarily kid focused. Like, the kids aren't really the focus of this movie. Like, it's not a family holiday movie, but I think it's a fun holiday movie that, you know, older people can appreciate too. But I definitely feel it's geared towards more, like, young adults and kids, and more young adults than kids, and maybe an older demographic for that film, which is perfectly fine. Like, it's, I can see why it may not necessarily be the best for your kids because there is, you know, a couple F bombs and S bombs and things like that they put in this movie. But I see where you're coming from that, and it's not necessarily a family holiday film, but I still think it's one that warrants, like, for me anyway, staying in my rotation just because of that.
Yeah, so I said it was confusing because the overtopness would put it more in the kid range because it's the more silly humor you would do for kids. And that's why I said it was confusing because it does feel like it's made for teens and above, but it also feels like it's too over the top for teens and adults. Like, it really depends on how you handle the overtopness of it because it is... Like, I love the Santa Claus series. It's over the top, and it has some rough ones with the second. Probably the third movie is the worst for all of it. The series is decent, which we may be getting another season of that in a year or two because I couldn't get one ready for this holiday season. But, yeah, that's what I said. Like, it's not really geared towards the families to watch, but then it also just doesn't feel like it's geared for teens and adults that much. I'm, like, just trying to struggle on who this is for because, like I said, it went super serious, but went way over the top. And it's like, I don't know who this is for. It was fun. I laughed and I had fun with it, but it was also just kind of very confusing because of how serious everyone was. The adults were acting, but then everything else was so over the top when it came to the villains and who they're fighting against, and, you know, the main villain in the movie, and like you said, with the snowman, which was fun, but also silly and over the top, and especially that whole sequence on the beach where they're having, you know, kind of a talk was ridiculously over the top. That felt very like kid made for TV movie type of acting and all that stuff. But like I said, that's where the tone and everything was really odd and mixed to me because it's like, you'll get some decent moments and then you'll go almost slapstick, which, okay, well, that's for little kids. Well, this is for teens. Well, this is for adults. And now this is back to kids. Like, it was just kind of all over the place for me when it came to that. But I'm also looking at it through Dad's eyes and stuff as well to see if it's something my family could. I mean, my oldest might, you know, find some fun out of it, but for my youngest, it might be maybe a little too much for her to really enjoy. But yeah, it was just, it was really mixed. I mean, there was fun with Krampus, and it dealt with a lot of the more mythological stuff when it came to not only holidays, but creatures and everything else out there. But like I said, it just was really odd tonally for me.
Sure, and I get that, and in some ways, it does have a little bit of an identity crisis. I will give you that because there are some stuff that I'm just like, it probably would work better in a younger version of that film, but like I said, it didn't completely take me out of anything. I think at the end of the day, the film still has a decent message to it. In a movie like this, you're not going to get some life-changing plot story or anything like that, but I think the through line of the film followed a very clear, specific direction well. I think it did. Like, is it the best movie I've ever seen? No. Is it the worst movie I've ever seen? Far from it. Like, I think it's a solidly, slightly above average movie, which is fine, especially fine for a holiday film. Like, there are so few, in my opinion, holiday films that are just great at the end of the day, classic movies and films. There's a handful, and there are some that when we go to talk about those movies coming up soon in a future episode that we're going to do around Christmas time, or really, really good films that happen to be holiday films. You know what I mean? So there's a fun conversation that we could have about that when we get there. But yeah, as far as like a fun holiday movie, I think it fits right in there for me. And like I said, it's a lot of fun. It's cheesy. It's over the top in fun ways that doesn't make it a bad movie, but it makes it fun and enjoyable. I had a good time watching it.
Yeah, so for me, Red One it was fun. I had a good time watching it, but I also struggled with the tone, the over-the-topness of just finding exactly who this geared for, because I do look at it for my own enjoyment. I went in to turn my brain off with it and just watch it, and I had fun in that way, but also looking as a parent and everything else, I really questioned just who was this movie made for. So in the end, I would probably give it, to me, a 5 to 5.5. It was something I would watch again, but it is not one. I almost compare it to Jingle All the Way. Jingle All the Way, of course, is kind of all talked about as being one of the worst ones made, but I can have fun with it. But it wasn't a very good movie, and I kind of put Red One in the same way. So it is probably like a 5 to 5.5 for me.
Yeah, I get that. But for me, like, don't get me wrong. I say I enjoyed it and it's going into my holiday rotation. It doesn't make it the best film I've seen, right? Like, if I had to give it a grade, I would probably give it like a 6.5. Like 6 to 6.5 is, I think, fair range for me, which means it's a slightly above average movie that you could kind of just go and have fun with. Like, it's one that I don't mind coming back to, and I'll probably watch again before Christmas if it happens to make its way onto streaming before then, which it very possibly could. We don't know yet when that's going to come on demand, but if I have the opportunity to watch it again before the holiday season, I will. If not, I'll watch it again next year when it comes around time for this time of the year, because, you know, it helps get you in a little bit of a spirit of Christmas. It does have a nice message at the end of this. Like, Chris Evans is, you know, struggling with being a dad as well in this movie. So there is some family element, even though it's not completely geared towards family, which kind of does demerit it a little bit. I'm not going to argue the merits of that, but I would put it in the solid, you know, 6 to 6.5 range for me. Is like a fun, enjoyable movie that's, you know, not going to win any awards. It's not going to change anybody's career, but the acting in it is very fine. Like, J.K. Simmons does good as Santa, like a buff Santa with, you know, a good solid moral compass. And there's, you know, some other great performances as well. I think Chris Evans does a good job with what he's given to do in that movie too. A lot of silliness in the way they're able to jump across, you know, different landscapes and things like that.
Some kind of superhero parody stuff
very
in there
much,
too.
it's very much so. It kind of leans into that absurdity a little bit, which I have fun with it. It doesn't take itself so seriously, but the actors are kind of playing themselves seriously. So it a little bit is tonally a mess, but if you understand that going in, I think you'll have a good time watching it. It's a fun, cheesy holiday film just for that specific reason.
Yeah, let us know in the comments if you went and checked out Red One and what you thought about it. We'd love to talk about it. Come to our Discord as well and have a discussion about it. But Red One is in theaters now. You can check it out. It's kind of kicking off the holiday season. We got some big films coming up to end of the year, but we do have a few holiday stuff coming out. But this is one that was originally supposed to be going on streaming, but they decided to do a theatrical release for as well. And we know we have a few other kind of streaming movies are trying to push to film, and we'll see if this does enough to get them to commit to do more theatrical releases, or because it sounds like it's not doing gangbusters for its opening weekend, if that kind of keeps some of the studios to pull back on putting streaming films out in theaters.
Yeah, I know that's one that Netflix has been paying attention to very, very heavily. I know with The Rock, they put one of his films directly on Netflix and didn't really release it in theaters for more than maybe a week, but definitely one to keep an eye on. Definitely go see that and let us know what you think about it for sure. Now, I want to move into our TV review of the week. So we have part 2 of season 6, the final season of Cobra Kai. Cobra Kai, in my opinion, has been one of the sleeper hits of the last several years for me. this show is way better than it had any business being based on the premise of the show alone. But it's a really well done show. So we had the first 5 episodes that dropped over the summer. You can go back in our archives and check out how we thought, how we viewed that first part of the season. Now we just get the next 5 episodes of season 6. So this is part 2 of a 3-part setting for this final season of 15 episodes. And they really, to kind of jump into it now, the previous 5 episodes set up them going and getting ready for this world tournament called the Sekai Taikai, which is this world, group martial arts tournament. And this season is completely centered around that. So you have, the Miyagi-Do group and their representatives, you have Cobra Kai and their representatives, and you have several other international dojos with their groups coming together for this crazy tournament. And it picks right up where the last part of it ends, and you just get into the craziness right away with this show.
It does do a little craziness. Like, it almost feels like this tournament is a American Gladiator version of karate, because they have some stuff where, all right, you got to fight on this beam, but the beam is this platform is going to be suspended in the air, and you have to knock people off, and then the others have to climb up and get on and stuff. So, like, it's been going over the top the whole season. Like, There's a lot of stuff that it does really over the top stuff. It does really good, but it was heavily centered around this tournament. And of course, you've got drama with Kreese, but in some of the ways that I didn't like this with this second part was some of the drama that they threw in, especially with the kids, felt super really forced. Like, being in the 6th season now, and we've had the kids go through a lot, that just how quickly they dissolve into the drama, especially like Robbie being distracted, and you have Hawk and Dimitri at each other. Like, some of it just felt like way too over the top of the drama. It didn't take me out of it, but it felt like they were trying too hard to force some extra drama, because they could have just let the drama of the tournament be all of it, and it would have been fantastic. So they could have lightened up a little bit on the drama that they did with the kids, but it was enjoyable. Like, we got some decent action. There was a few fight scenes at a time that they probably could have used a different angle or different cut, because you kind of see some fights, like, you see the choreographing to it, because it's like, this is a really slow block, and then it comes up after they're already in the block. Like, but other fights looked really good, high over the top. You could definitely see in between the cast, especially in this season, who is more skilled actually in the choreography and actual fighting, and who is more acting fighting.
Yeah, and they do a good job of kind of like taking it over the top. And I see where you're coming from, where the sense that there's a little bit of over the top manufactured drama, but I think that manufactured drama plays its way into the tournament, because the things that are going on in their personal lives are really affecting their performance in the tournament. So you see Miyagi-Do struggling in this tournament, as Cobra Kai is this well-oiled machine that's doing really well. They're one of the best dojos in the tournament. And you got Miyagi-Do, who's got all this other turmoil around them, really struggling to, perform well in this tournament, even though they've shown, several times throughout the series, they're better than Cobra Kai when it comes to the actual karate portion of it. But you have all of this inner drama working, like, Tori, defecting to Cobra Kai before the tournament, and how that affects Robbie and his ability to be the captain of the Miyagi-Do team, and how poorly he starts to perform. And, we're going to dive now into some bigger spoilery type stuff, I think, to kind of really get into the meat of the season. So if you haven't watched the series yet, you might want to jump ahead to our kind of spoiler-free conclusion when we wrap up, and come back to this when, we start, when you've seen it, so you can kind of make sense of what we're about to talk about here. So that's kind of your warning now, that we are going to go into some of the more spoilery stuff in this part of the season, to kind of lend some credence to how we feel about the show and why we feel about it. So, with Tori defecting to Cobra Kai, Robbie is the leader. He was, he beat Miguel to become the captain of the team, but this whole side story with Tori and, his being affected by her defecting to Cobra Kai is really affecting how he performs, and he's getting the crap kicked out of him throughout this entire part of the season, where, like, even Miguel, who is so hell-bent on performing well and kind of takes on this Superman persona to kind of be the one-man team in this, because it seems like everybody else with their own stuff is like, hey, I got to put everything on my back and just kind of carry the team, which he does in a lot of cases, but Robbie Robbie's really faltering here as a leader because of this distraction and his inability to focus on the fight in front of him with everything's kind of circling around him at that point.
Yeah, and this is kind of where I said with the drama, that seems a little too manufactured a bit, because, yeah, you've got Robbie, who's been through a lot to the series. Tori's been through a lot, and yeah, we left her off that her mom has passed away and she feels lost. But, they do dive into the others trying to explain, like, we were trying to be there for it. This is why we didn't want you doing the tournament, because we were trying to look out for your best interests, because Tori doesn't know how to let other people in. She doesn't know how to let people in. But I was kind of like, okay, this is, I get, but a little too over the top with Robbie, because he literally is like deer in headlights because he sees Tori. Yeah. He's just out there fighting and he's like, oh, kick, lose a point. Like, it just went a little too over the top. And then you get him coming back in a nice way towards the end of the season here of part 2, that you get to see him kind of maturing and going back. But it was just kind of how silly dramatic it went with a lot of stuff. And then you've got a lot of predictable stuff where, all right, we got Axel on the Iron Dragons become a big thorn in the side, which we learn a lot of mystery, that there's even more mystery between who the Iron Dragons are and who's behind it and stuff. And you've got some great new people added to the cast because of that. But the Iron Dragon dojo is a very serious, like, they're very highly skilled, but you get to see some more that Sensei Wolf is beating them and attacking them hard, and that's what's getting them to be. But you also get Zara, who's the female champion, who's always doing lives talking like, oh, hey, I'm still undefeated and I can't do this and I can't do that. You get the teen drama and stuff on that, but that could be a little over the top. And then you got Dimitri and Hawk are still fighting about their colleges and stuff, and that carries all the way through into the finale of this. And like, I kind of get, but like, they just went so hard into keeping the drama up with them. Like, it was an enjoyable season and had some great fighting and some great action stuff, but like, that's some of the drama and stuff that I was talking about. Like, they just went too hard and too over the top with trying to make sure that they're all struggling and having this, because it was also trying to set up, all right, you've got Tori potentially against Zara, but also against Sam. But does she want to go against Sam? And then you get Quan, who wants to take on Robbie, but you're also looking at the other side. And then you got Axel, who is looking at Sam, but now he's mad at Miguel. And like, it adds a whole lot of more drama, and it kind of plays out as you expected until the finale.
Yeah, because a lot of the stuff's building up to this mid-season, 2/3 of the way through finale, however you want to describe it, and it all culminates in this giant, this giant brawl that takes place at the end of the finale. But like, you go through the course of the tournament, right? You've got the drama of the tournament itself. You have, like we said, Miyagi-Do is really struggling with all of the other things. The external distractions are very much playing into their performance of the tournament. Not only they're fighting with the other crews, Cobra Kai, the Iron Fist, drama with Axel and Sam because Miguel had to leave at one point. Like, there's like a lot of layers to this that kind of, in a way, like, it feels like it can get very messy, but what I think they do a good job is, like, they get it back to where it needs to go. Like, it kind of all branches out, but it still kind of comes together in a way that makes sense. And I think that's what they do such a good job of it. Like, at the end of the day, the show's like, what, karate's going to solve everything? It's kind of a parody of itself.
Karate does solve everything.
Karate solves everything. But it's like a lot of silliness and over the top, but they lean into it so well. And I think that's what's brilliant about this show is they know it's absurd, but they try to make it so absurd in a way that makes sense. And I think they do a good job of it. They really do. Is there a lot of over-manufactured drama for the sake of over-manufactured drama? Yes, but it works. Like, it's not like it's anything that's like, it completely kills the story for you, because at the end of the day, like, it comes back to where it needs to, right? So there are some silly stuff. There was some silly stuff with Chosen in this part.
I was going to say Chosen was probably one of my favorite parts of it.
He had a fun arc, showing up drunk because of, reasons, and then him ending it with a relationship that you didn't see coming, which was a lot of fun and funny. But like, it's a lot of, I just love this show so much. I really do. Like, it has no reason being as good as it does and having its hooks in me as much as it does, but it just does. Like, this is a show that I watched in one sitting. It's 5 episodes, and the longest episode's like 45 minutes. Like, you can watch this, you can watch these, shows very quickly in a couple hours if you need to. Within like 4 hours, you can watch an entire season, or an entire section of episodes like this, and it's such a fun, easy watch that you don't realize that you're watching it it's a very easily bingeable show. And I think that's what's helped make this show so successful, is that it keeps you interested and it keeps you hooked in. Like, I didn't take a break watching this. Like, when it came out, as soon as I started watching it, I didn't stop until it was done. Like, I never took a break, which is a testament to how good a show is. It's like, even you could just binge it and you can't really tell that you've killed 4 hours.
Yeah. And continuing on with some of the more spoiler stuff that we learned that Kreese had, everything dropped against him because, of course, they need to make sure he's there and everything. But we also got Silver showing back up, and again, everything has been dropped against him so that we can make sure he's there. But he adds in a lot more drama, especially when it comes to Daniel, because Daniel is still kind of searching for those answers about Mr. Miyagi. So, he's learned that Mr. Miyagi competed in this tournament, but he never talked about it. And he's trying to find answers to and stuff. And he does, towards the end of the season, get a little bit of answers. But, of course, we're left open to find more about that in the final 5, because we learned that Mr. Miyagi, again, big spoiler here, potentially killed somebody while he was fighting, and that's one of the reasons why he doesn't want to talk about it. And, we get Daniel gets kidnapped, and we have a whole lot of kind of craziness that happens with it. Johnny and Daniel are fighting a lot because of Kreese and Silver. And, yeah, like I said, the drama is super maxed out, just forcing. But then one minute they're all fighting, and the next minute, oh, wait, Silver's here. We're all good now. Let's move on. But I still say probably the silliest over-the-top drama that they put in was with Johnny, Miguel, and Carmen. So, they learn that Carmen has been rushed to the hospital. She's having a problem with the baby. And it's like, all right, we're going to leave the tournament. We got to go home. We got to be there for her. So this is going from Barcelona to L.A. And, of course, they get on the plane, and Johnny's dealing with an unruly drunk and, up in first class. And then the stewardess, flight attendants don't really like Johnny, so there's a battle there. And they're doing all this fighting and everything on the plane, and then they finally get to Carmen, and they make you think that something big has happened, and then it didn't really happen, and they're like, all right, you need to go back to Barcelona now and fight. So they flew all the way back over to check on you immediately, like, okay, all is good. Now I want you to fly all the way back and still fight in the tournament and win it. And promise me you're going to win it. Like, that was very cheesy and over the top. Okay, well, we see this. It wasn't even the next episode. It was literally, you got a bunch of scenes in the air, and then by the end of the episode, oh yeah, we're back.
Yeah, it was a silly episode, but I think it was a good bonding thing for Miguel and Johnny.
Yeah,
really.
You had some good scenes
like
between
some
those
really
two.
good bonding, and I think that's kind of the central theme. Like, we joke a lot about the silliness of the show, and there's a ton of it. Mm-hmm. Like, don't get me wrong, but I think what this season, the kind of overarching theme of this part of the season is the mending of relationships, right? So you get people kind of putting their differences aside and kind of working through their problems and, just kind of getting on the same page. It feels like we've finally got, through some of the most absurd means possible, a burying of the hatchet between Daniel and Johnny. I think you get that in this. You get kind of an understanding between Sam and Tori. I think that, like, after they kind of talk a little bit, you get a mending of the fences there. You get a mending of the fences with Dimitri and Hawk, that, now they're buddies again on the same page. They're really just mad at each other because they care about each other so much that they're not going to different schools. They're upset about it, but they still care about each other. And at the end of the day, that's what matters, right? So they kind of come to that acceptance. And then you also get, what was the other relationship that was mended in that one? It was
you had Kenny and Devin.
And Kenny and Daniel's son that Anthony that kind of mended their friendship in the most absurd way possible. I won't spoil that for anybody. Just go watch that. It's so silly and stupid, but funny at the same time. Like, they kind of have a little bit of coming to an understanding of that as well. You get some fun appearances from Kenny in this show as well, but you get a lot of layers to these kids. You kind of, they're not lacking for character development in this. Like, they go through some absurd manufactured drama, but it kind of helps shape them to kind of mature and grow up, which is what they're doing here, right? So season ends with like this giant brawl in the tournament at the end.
That was like a 10, 15-minute sequence.
Yeah, like they're trying to set up this final part of the tournament where it gets to the individual portion where the captains finally get their individual, like, face-offs and stuff to see who's going to be the world champions, right? So there's this incredibly long, drawn-out battle at the end of this last episode that ends in a really dark and dramatic way that kind of grinds everything to a halt, really, because you have everybody fighting. It's the biggest fight scene that they've ever done in a show that's kind of notorious for like, oh no, it's another karate brawl. This is like the karate brawl to end all karate brawls for this one.
Yeah, it was a big, long sequence. It went on a lot longer than I expected, and it did have an ending that I fully wasn't. They kind of telegraphed something like this could happen, but I fully didn't see it happening because it does involve some darker aspects and stuff too, which we won't get into spoiling exactly what happened, even though we're doing the spoiler discussion. But yeah, it ended in a way I didn't expect. But I did want to touch on it. It was fun to see Louis Tan show up as Sensei Wolf and how he kind of goes around, and we got some, because with this final battle sequence, we got the senseis fighting against each other. We got senseis versus kind of the kids in some parts, and we got different battles. Like some of the stuff was telegraphed. We got some of the fights and set up, but it looked like it was setting up to telegraph exactly like, all right, we know who's going to battle in the championship between the boys and the girls, but we're kind of left on the cliffhanger because we don't exactly know what's going to happen because of something big happening. And yeah, we did have a cheesy moment of where, one of the teams get knocked out, and then they call everybody back together and like, you know what, the Russian team has been disqualified, because that's what they do, is get disqualified. And that was a big cheesy moment to bring everything back together, because like, of course they did, and of course we get it. But it does set up for an interesting dynamic for the final 5 episodes, because we have a lot of big drama. Daniel is struggling with what he's learned about Mr. Miyagi. We also got, I liked it, but it was also a little strange because we did get a dream sequence where Daniel is like fighting against Mr. Miyagi in the Saikai Taikai tournament, but Mr. Miyagi's version, and we get to see Mr. Miyagi in 2 different ways. We got a different actor playing him, but then we also get some AI CGI of bringing Pat back in with this, which I kind of liked, but then it was just shocking to see his face again and stuff in there. But yeah, that finale was probably the best episode of this final season so far, because it did take all that drama and they wrapped it up in a decent way while leaving plenty of it to still go into the finale. But the final fights, that 10-15 minute sequence of all the battles at the end, was done really well. It was a lot of fun. You got it moving around in a lot of different ways. You've got people coming together that you didn't expect to come together and being saved. You've got so much drama on all sides that came together and like, oh, now this drama makes sense, and they got it all together. But it ended on a really high note to leave you wanting, like, all right, how is this going to end? We do learn that in February is when we're going to get the final 5 episodes. We got the movie that they're doing between Jackie Chan and Ralph Macchio with Daniel. They're going to be together in May. So we're still wondering if in those final 5 episodes, if we're going to get something that brings that together or ties, because we haven't seen anything yet. I thought maybe one of the dojos would bring in maybe Jackie Chan's character, something in this final season, or maybe he'll show up like, I don't know, I picture Chuck Norris in Dodgeball, where you see him as a judge and giving the thumbs up that they have to maybe get some new judges, and they come in and it's Jackie Chan's character, and that's kind of how you get that brought together. But they did set up a really intriguing, interesting end to this series.
Yeah, there's a lot that they have to wrap up in the final 5 episodes. I'm so sad that this show's coming to an end, but it feels like it's time, right? They've kind of exhausted all avenues of this, kind of leading towards this grand tournament and how it's going to end. You don't know where the tournament's going forward or if it's going forward based on how the last episode ends. Like, if the tournament's done based on this brawl, like, how do you wrap up these final 5 episodes? Where is that tension going to come from? How are they going to get through this and past this and get to the finality of that? And where this leaves all of our other characters to, kind of get to where they're going to set them up for their future lives of these characters outside of the show. Because it's kind of, in this last episode, they come to the realization that this is probably the last time they're going to get to fight together as a team and as a dojo, and they have that really nice bonding moment with each other that kind of helps get them ready for that that lengthy brawl that they go through. But you got 5 more episodes to put a bow on everything and see where everything ends up. Is there going to be something that ties it to the movie that's coming out? Or is this something like, hey, we're going to do this, and maybe it's like an end credit feature where he runs into Jackie Chan or something, and like you see it there? Or is it just going to be walled off and it's its complete own thing? Like, we don't know for sure, but it's a show that, like I said, I'm sad to see it come to an end, but it feels like it's the right time and they're going out in the most over the top way possible, and I'm really excited to see how it ends.
Yeah, because if you grew up with the Karate Kid movies, you know how cheesy and over the top they can be. We even got some more cameos from older actors, but I didn't recognize at first. They show you kind of things into episode 9 or 10. They show you who these people were. I'm like, oh, I didn't even put that because they look completely different from where they went. But I had fun with this series overall with the second part here. Like, it had some over the top manufactured drama that could have done down, but I think they finished it off at the end of these episodes in a really good way of kind of wrapping up some of the drama, but getting the drama to the right point that we kind of see what's probably going to happen with these characters, but we're looking forward to seeing what goes forward, and even left open a little mystery of what might happen to a few characters. I have a feeling we see something bad happen to one of the characters, but there's probably going to be some sort of way that they change how that exactly happens, or do they go forward with kind of a darker element to the series? But yeah, overall, I had quite a bit of fun with it, and I am looking forward to see. But it is sad that it's ending. I'm glad it's going out on its own terms and, not getting canceled, because most series on Netflix don't go very far. You think 3 to 4 seasons are the max, and we got 6 out of this. So it's kind of outlived a lot of other series that Netflix has done. They don't commit that long to a lot of series, but this is done pretty well for him, and I'm looking forward to see how it wraps up with the final 5.
See, I'm excited to see it as well, how they wrap up season 6 part 3. Season 6 part 3 is coming out, I want to say February 13th is when they said it's going to drop, right before Valentine's Day, right before my birthday. So I'm excited to get that as like an early birthday present for myself, and really, really pumped to see how they put a bow on this series that I've loved for the last several years, and it's just so good, so fun. Season 6 part 2 of Cobra Kai is out on Netflix right now. You can watch all 5 episodes. Go check them out and come back and tell us what you thought, because we'd be excited to talk about this show with anybody that wants to talk about it. I know several friends that are obsessed with this show as much as I am, and we've already kind of low-key talked about it on the side already, and have already gone and watched this entire part 2, and have a lot of theories on what we think is going to happen to wrap this show up. But if you do get a chance to check it out, come to our Discord, talk to us about it. Leave us a comment on the YouTube video too, and let us know what you think.
Yeah, I've had fun with it. It's been an interesting way to wrap up the final season. I mean, it is a little odd that they're breaking up into so many different parts, but it's leaving that suspense and getting you kind of waiting and wanting more out of it. So I've had a lot of fun. The second part has been enjoyable. It ended in a really fun way. You're kind of waiting until the series fully wraps up to give our score overall of the entire season, because it's being broken up so much, just to see if they're able to stick the landing and what they're going with. But it's been an enjoyable ride, so make sure you check it out on Netflix. You've got 10 episodes to watch if you haven't seen any of the final season, broken up in 5 different parts. So it's still like 1 through 5 and 6 through 10, so it's not like separate seasons or anything else. Like, it picks up that Part 2 is 6 through 10. Make sure you check them out. That way you know that you're not rewatching something or missing anything. Like for Part 2, you're looking for episodes 6, 7, 8, 9, and 10 to be able to finish it. But it was a lot of fun. If you enjoy The Karate Kid, you've probably already watching them. But if you haven't, check it out. It's cheesy. It's over the top, but it's been a ton of fun.
It's a really good show. I've really enjoyed the writing of it. I love that it doesn't take itself so seriously, and I'm really, like I said, cannot wait for the third part to drop in February.
So coming up this week, we kind of have our Barbenheimer of this year, that we have Gladiator 2 and Wicked both out this week. We are checking out both of those. It's going to be a lot of fun just to see. Wicked it's part 1, but it's not being called part 1. It's almost 3 hours long, but there is another movie that's coming. So it is going to be interesting to see how they kind of end it to set up the second one. But I'm looking forward to checking out both of these. I've seen the stage play. It was really well done, really good. Gladiator, if you go back to our kind of favorite film episode, you can see what we felt about Gladiator in there. It's one of my favorite films. I'm looking forward to see how they've done a second one. It looks bigger and crazier and over the top, but it's been getting some good early praise, and I'm looking forward to see exactly how both of these do coming out against each other. Is this going to be a huge box office weekend, and who's going to kind of come out on top? I think Gladiator probably come in second if I had to guess, with just how big the marketing and everything else has been for Wicked. It's probably going to come out on top, but I think both of them are going to do really well, and you're going to have a lot of people who are doing a double feature of seeing both of them. Probably not in the same day just because of how long both of them. It's going to take you 5.5 hours or so, not including all the commercials and trailers, to watch both of these films.
These are the types of weeks that really make me love movies, because they're both big budget, over the top blockbuster movies that are coming out directly against each other in the same week. It's going to be a ton of fun. I've been looking forward to seeing Wicked for so long. Absolutely love the Broadway show. I've seen the musical. It is amazing. It's one of my favorites of all time, being a theater kid myself. So excited for this. It looks like absolutely perfect casting. Just chomping at the bit to go see this. I'm actually going to see this the day this show drops, so I'm getting an extra early screening of that. Very excited for that. Gladiator 2 looks incredible. The early returns on that, based on spoiler-free reviews that we've seen, has been amazing as well. Really excited to check both of those out and talk about it on the show next week.
Yeah, on demand, we have Smile 2 coming out on November 19th, so that'll be available to buy or rent. I haven't seen either of them. This was another one that was advertised so much, but it's done decently well. But this was also one that it was kind of a really confusing time with advertising for this movie, because Trap came out that was based around a pop star and musical, and then you had Smile 2 was also another horror film based around a pop star and stuff. So at times I got the two trailers mixed up until it really got into the meat of it. But when it started, wait, this is Trap. We've already said, oh no, this is Smile. Like, we know the Smile ones have actually done pretty well and been decently reviewed. So I'm looking forward to kind of checking out. Maybe I'll go back and kind of watch both of these and see how both of them did. But if you're a fan of the Smile series, you can get that on November 19th.
Yeah, the first Smile movie is definitely unique, and I thought it was okay. The second one, from what I'm hearing from people that have seen it, I have yet to see it myself, is that the twist in the second one is really good. And they say it's probably better than the first one, so I'm excited to check that one out too. I'll check it out when it comes out on demand for sure.
And they did have a bit of viral marketing because they had actors show up at like the World Series, and they're sitting behind the home plate just smiling creepily, and you're seeing them all throughout. And even like with Alien Romulus, where they had face huggers attacking people in New York and LA and stuff, they had similar stuff where people were just showing up in different locations and just smiling at people. So I think that helped it out, but it was really interesting to see how they did their marketing for that one.
For sure.
Over on the streaming side, so we have Spellbound, a family animated film coming out on Netflix on November 22nd. And then on the TV side, we have yet another kind of reboot and remaking, Cruel Intentions, on Prime Video. That's out on November 20th. So, that was a big movie when we were younger, back in our day. And it's interesting to see kind of where they can go with it. It was a really dramatic film that had, Sarah Michelle Gellar and a lot of big names of the time in that movie. So I'm curious to see exactly how this new reboot remake of it is going to do.
Yeah, it's definitely one worth checking out if you're a fan of the original film. The film was definitely unique for its time for sure, but it had a lot of star power in it, and it's very memorable for a few reasons that we won't touch on in this podcast. But yeah, definitely excited to check out that one just to see if it keeps similar tones and what it could look like in 2024. That's definitely one to check out for sure.
Because we also have I Know What You Did Last Summer's coming back out again. So something that was big to at least Sarah Michelle Gellar between these two. She's got two of her movies being rebooted and remade and all that. Of course, you had Reese Witherspoon in it as well. So there was a lot of big names at the time that was in that film. And we'll see exactly what they can do with this remake. I mean, Amazon has been doing a pretty decent job with bringing things kind of back, or new series and all that. So it's kind of a lighter week. I mean, you've got a lot of other shows that are around and coming on, but these were kind of the biggest things that we saw. But I mean, Gladiator 2 and Wicked is going to be probably what everybody is talking about this weekend, and we'll see if it can live up to what Barbie and Oppenheimer did last year, if they both end up having really successful runs, because we've got several big movies in December coming as well. So they have a lot that's going to be competing against it, because you've got Mufasa and even Nosferatu with having another horror film, and you have Moana 2 right after it, which they're expecting it to be huge. So there's a lot of big movies coming out to finish off the year.
Very exciting times if you're a fan of films like we are, for sure. There's so much fun stuff in the coming weeks that we get to talk about that I'm excited to go check out and kind of do our reviews for it. But that is going to do it for this week's episode. We cannot thank you enough for your continued support. If you're watching us on YouTube, please give us a like. Give us a subscription, hit the like button and the notification bell so you're getting the new episodes. Leave us a comment on what you're watching. Let us know. We love to have that interaction as well. You can join us on Discord, as well as we'llbringthepopcorn.com for all of our social media info. You can check out our archives for all our past episodes to get you caught up as well. Coming up next week, we are going to be reviewing the double feature, Gladiator 2 and Wicked. Very excited to check both of those out and bring that to you next week. So until then, I'm Josh, he's Brad, and we'll see you next time.